Hi guys, it's Monday, which of course means it's the Monday show. And because there's been so much going down in Ukraine over the weekend, we thought we'd make this week's show a Ukraine special. Coming up, we'll be taking a look at Russia invading Ukraine, which won its independence from the former Soviet Union in 1991. What other world leaders and politicians have had to say about this, including one with an extremely short memory, what Russia's been saying in response, why the head of the Ukrainian Navy has been fired for treason, and Poland mobilising tanks on its border with Ukraine. Plus, of course, we have your comments. So first up, the biggest news from the weekend is undoubtedly the fact that on Sunday, Russia invaded the Crimean Peninsula in Ukraine and has now managed to assume complete operational control of the region without a single bullet being fired. On Saturday, the Russian President Vladimir Putin won official backing from his parliament to enter Ukraine, and the following day sent in 6,000 air and ground troops. Although some Ukrainian soldiers were still caught in a standoff with Russian troops while we were making this video, Russia had surrounded several military bases in the area and occupied key installations, such as airports. Worryingly, some mobile phone services are also reported to have been blocked. This full-scale invasion came a few days after armoured vehicles and troops first began arriving in the Crimean Peninsula, where the majority of Ukrainians are Russian speakers and where Moscow has a naval base. These troops didn't have insignia on their uniforms, and Russia said they were simply local volunteers, but their vehicles had Russian military plates and they were well armed. Exactly what Russia's intentions are now is unclear. The United States has admitted that it could be part of a wider invasion, however, and men across Ukraine have reportedly been receiving call-up papers and will start reporting for training in 10 days. And now it's time for your comments. On our video about Australia's treatment of asylum seekers, Watchdog said this: "China talking about the treatment of refugees, WTF? If you take a look at our video on North Korea's human rights crimes from a couple of weeks back, in which we talk about China's treatment of North Korea defectors, you might understand Watchdog's surprise." And on our video asking whether this is the end of Bitcoin, Goshen Gaming said this: "I don't think this is the end. I think this is a new page on Bitcoin's and other currencies' life. We must fail so we can learn how to succeed." But back to Ukraine and that small issue of a Russian invasion. Unsurprisingly, Western leaders and politicians aren't too happy about Russia invading its neighbour. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel has accused Putin of breaking international law, and during a phone call with the US President Barack Obama, reportedly said she was not sure if Putin was in touch with reality and said he was in another world. However, her spokesman stressed today that it wasn't too late to resolve the crisis by political and peaceful means. Meanwhile, the Australian government has summoned the Russian ambassador to explain his country's actions. The US are trying to persuade other countries to impose economic sanctions on Russia, and the British Prime Minister David Cameron has said his government will be boycotting the upcoming Winter Paralympics in Sochi, Russia. But it was remarks made by John Kerry, the US Secretary of State, yesterday that really left us with our jaws on the floor. Speaking on CBS's Face the Nation news programme, Kerry said this: "You just don't, in the 21st century, behave in 19th century fashion by invading another country on completely trumped-up pretext." Well, we don't know about you, but this got us thinking about another time in the 21st century when a country was invaded on a so-called trumped-up pretext. Iraq, anyone? Earlier today, the Russian Foreign Ministry said Kerry's remarks contained threats against Russia and were unacceptable, while the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, called on his country's Western partners to put aside geopolitical calculations and put the interests of the Ukrainian people first. And in other Ukraine news, the head of the country's navy has been fired for treason after refusing to fight the Russians and instead surrendering the navy's headquarters in the Crimean city of Sevastopol. This video, released on YouTube, reportedly shows the former Navy Chief Rear Admiral Denis Berezovsky defecting to the Crimea region. Oh, and not to mention that Poland has begun moving tanks and troops